Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Faster Way podcast. I am thrilled to be here today with Dr. Pompa. Dr. Pompa, thank you so much for being with us. We met at an event just a few weeks ago, and I was on stage, and you were coming on right after me. I think I was passing you a mic. We were exchanging clickers, but then we had
Sure.
an opportunity to chat backstage, and I was so intrigued by your background, by your practice, by the problems that you solve on behalf of your patients. And so I knew that I wanted to get to know you better, and it's just a wonderful opportunity to have you on the podcast. So before we dive into your specialty, I want to hear when and why you entered into the wellness industry. When and why did you become a doctor?
Yeah, well, look, it was a long story. I mean, I could go way back, but I literally fractured my neck wrestling years ago, and literally I could never turn that way. And a friend of mine kept saying, "You have to go to my brother. He's a chiropractor." And I'm like, "I don't go to doctors." I was raised by an old Italian bricklayer who just didn't bring me to doctors as a kid. He was raised by a grandmother who didn't vaccinate them, didn't, we just treated at home, right? So, anyways, it was funny. So finally, I end up going to his brother, and I'm sitting through like his lecture, and I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, I get all this, of course, right? And he's like, you should be a chiropractor. Well, I had a million reasons why I shouldn't, but 3, 4 years later, I ended up coming to be a chiropractor. But fast forward now, it was about 1999, 2000. I got very sick unexplainably, and when I had a very busy practice at that time, I was seeing around 800 people a week, and so I was driving it. I was also cycling at the time, and so when fatigue hit, I thought I'm just overworking, overtraining, and but then it went to like weird anxiety, then it went to insomnia, then it went to like all kinds of really bizarre symptoms. Then I became allergic to every food I was eating. So all these things just kind of escalated. Long story short, finding my way out of that led me to everything that I teach today. So pain to purpose is my story. And now I've been teaching doctors for 20 years, actually. Everything that I learned and what God showed me out of that. And so here I am. God had absolute purpose in my pain, which I didn't want to hear at that time, but this will interest you. When I was going through it, obviously we had 2 young boys at the time, and my wife was really, crying out to God because, like, what happened to my husband? And because life as I know it really did come to a screeching halt. I'm minimizing how bad it really was, but I definitely didn't want to live anymore. It was that bad. But in her prayer time, God spoke to her heart. She didn't hear an audible voice, but confidently she said to me, God told me clearly that not only is He going to get you well, but He's going to take a message to the world through you. And that's exactly what happened. But by the way, Amanda, I didn't want to hear it from her. I got very angry at her with those words because my exact words back to her were, I can't even get myself well, and you're going to put that on me. So I didn't want to hear it and my lack of faith, but God did just that, and I've been blessed to take a major message, to the world, especially for such a time as this. Because there's so many people going, what is wrong with me? I can't figure it out. I have no energy, brain fog, anxiety, every symptom that I had, so many people have today, whereas 20 some years ago it wasn't the case.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And it's just inspiring to hear that you were able to turn that pain into a purpose and take that mess and turn it into your message to so many patients and other doctors. But take me back to that time, even just a little bit more. You said you're kind of minimizing the symptoms, you're minimizing that situation. I mean, I know you probably don't want to relive it, and you probably have to kind of, think about it or talk about it a lot with your patients, but you had 2 kids. Were you unable to work? Did you have to completely stop working? And share some of those other symptoms, because I'm sure some of our listeners are going to be able to say, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm dealing with that same thing.
Yeah, work became very difficult. I came in, I would look at my book and just pray for days that were, you know, not busy. My practice literally went like this. And I had a partner at the time was running a practice somewhere else. And I remember clearly the day. Matter of fact, you met Ryan Cole. It was his
Yeah.
father. Yeah, yeah. And Bill and I were, best buddies. And anyways, I remember the day where I had to break it to him that, why the practice was dumping. I was hiding my illness from my family. It's hard to tell about this. When I think about Bill, I get a little upset. I love him, and he just passed recently. And I hid it from everyone that mattered to me because frankly, I was embarrassed. I was the healthy guy, and all of a sudden I wasn't. And I didn't have an answer for myself, right? I had answers for everyone else, but God led me to it eventually, obviously. But practice was hard, and I wasn't the father that I needed to be. I definitely wasn't the husband that I needed to be. So yeah, it was a rough time.
Yeah. And what type of foods were you allergic to? You were kind of dealing with these food sensitivities with, potentially foods you'd never had issues with. You had, as you mentioned, brain fog, fatigue as well. So what foods were causing you issues?
Yeah, I never had a digestive problem in my life, and all of a sudden it was just like after I would eat, I just felt horrible, right? So then you start chasing it, right? And well, it's this, it's that, it's this, and sometimes it was this, and sometimes it was dairy, sometimes it was. I ended up eliminating just all grains from my diet because it seemed like I just wasn't digesting them. I was pretty much just eating some meat, vegetables, and I could eat a little bit of rice, it seemed, and maybe a little bit of potatoes, but I really narrowed down the foods I was eating. Very similar to people today, right? I did every test, by the way. I remember spending $5,000 on testing. I went to the head of toxicology at Allegheny General Hospital in Pittsburgh, and the best of the best, because at that point, one of the things I tracked down was I had every symptom that people with Mad Hatter's disease, and I don't know if y'all remember what that is, but people making felt hats were using mercury. And I was a Mad Hatter. I had all the symptoms, but my mercury test came back clean. Matter of fact, out of all the tests, I ran thyroid because my thyroid definitely wasn't functioning well. Blood work was perfect though, but my hair was falling out, literally clogging the drain. I was like losing muscle, getting fat around my waist. I mean, I've never had any of this, and of course, no energy, but the blood work came back, and I remember the doctor looking at me and saying, "Son, you're healthier than I am." And I was a lot younger then, so he called me son. But and I remember that feeling because he thought I was nuts, honestly. As a matter of fact, I went to other doctors. I went to an endocrinologist. I went to, and always the look of I was crazy. I wanted them to find something wrong. Now, eventually, my blood work would have went off, my thyroid, but my adrenals were fried. My saliva cortisol tests were absolutely showing I was adrenal fatigued. But when I would address my adrenals, I would support my hormones, my thyroid. I mean, some things might get better, but some things would worse. But what I knew for sure was I wasn't well lasting, and it wasn't working, everything that I was trying to do. And that's what really led me to the cause. I ended up at an endocrinologist. I read his books, and he said to me one day, and this was probably a year after I ran all that blood test, he said, Dan, I think you have mercury toxicity. And I said, I thought so too, but I did this blood work. And he said, that's the wrong test. That would be if you had acute mercury poisoning, meaning like the people making felt hats. He said, you probably have chronic. Try challenging heavy metals out of the tissue. Here's how you do it. And I did that, and I had some very odd things show up. But as it turned out, that was part of what was wrong. I definitely wasn't getting rid of heavy metals. I was accumulating a lot of them, and particularly mercury, as I learned in my center of the brain. Your pituitary is the gland that controls all of your hormones throughout your body. It's the control tower. And it's funny because before he told me this, I narrowed that down because when I was trying to help my thyroid, my adrenals, I realized it was this weird thing that it was like this would get better, this would get worse. So I thought it's something in my pituitary that's wrong. I even thought maybe I have a tumor in my pituitary. But as it turned out, studies show neurotoxins like certain heavy metals accumulate there in particular, especially on some people. And that led me to start realizing, okay, that was part of the problem. And he said, when did it all start? And, as it turned out, it started shortly after I had 2 silver fillings removed, which contained 50% mercury. And that kind of set my bucket overflowing, if you will. I was also living in a low-grade moldy home, which didn't help. And I was probably adapting to it until this mercury overflow and then I wasn't adapting to it. So, but I ended up having to deal with both of those things, which I call a perfect storm.
Wow. So it was a neurotoxicity diagnosis, essentially. You realized that the
Hmm.
mercury was at
Yep.
play. There was a lot of I was like on the edge of my seat, by the way. I'm like, how did you get out? I'm like looking at you now. You look healthy. You're vibrant. I met you. You're I'm like, what? But what did you do? But how did? So
Yeah.
so it was this doctor. You'd read his books. You went to him. He said, look into the mercury again. You'd already done a test,
Hmm.
but the test
Yeah.
was for acute mercury poisoning or
Hmm.
toxicity, which you didn't have, which reminds me of even a test that I did years and years ago. I'm doubled over in pain training clients at the gym. Can't figure out what's going on. Think maybe it's wheat. So I go to the doctor, and of course, they do only a celiac test. I don't test positive for celiacs, but come to find out, I'm severely allergic to wheat. Maybe not gluten necessarily, but wheat. And it's like they
Hmm.
send me home and they say, you're fine. Don't worry about it. Nothing. You're good. You tested negative. Celiac. Just keep doing what you're doing. And then finally, I'm like, I mean, literally months later, I'm like, let me just eliminate wheat, gluten, grains, all of it, see how I do. And it really helped. But so you had, that's so interesting, from the dental fillings.
Hmm.
That's a lesson for everyone listening too who has these dental fillings. I actually have metal in my mouth that I'm literally, I told you we had to end at a certain time today because guess where I'm going? I'm going to the dentist to get this
Yeah.
thing removed because I just had a doctor say you shouldn't have that in
Well,
your mouth.
yeah, the brain hates metal. Now, there's no mercury necessarily in that metal. It's probably stainless steel of some sort, but the brain doesn't like metal because it acts as a battery. Metal in an acid is a battery. And so now what's even worse than what you have is when you have a silver filling and then maybe you have a crown, or some type of brace, who knows. But now you have galvanism, it's called. And what that means is literally a battery effect. You have two opposing metals in an acid. That is a battery, and that gives off a charge, and it's measurable in people's mouth. Oh, I had that too. I had a gold filling. I think I had a crown on this side, plus the silver fillings, which
Yeah.
contain mercury. So I had a charge. I remember when they took out the last piece of metal, I started sleeping through the nights. It was like, and this level of anxiety went down just because I got rid of the metal. Now, listen, a healthy body can adapt to these things. Not that it's good, right? Because it's a stress, but when I took that stress away, now my body, at least I could, like, be semi-normal. And then I had to get the mercury out of the brain. And then I had to get out of that moldy home too, because my body was oversensitized now to the biotoxin that mold produces. So, look, one of the things that I teach, and I've been training doctors of all sorts for 20 years, is we have to remember to get to the cause, right? I wouldn't have got my life back with bioidentical hormones. I wouldn't have got my life back with the perfect supplements. I wouldn't have got my life back with more exercise, more the perfect diet. I was doing that for years at that point. It wasn't working. This is now what I had then that was rare is now the common. We are chasing thyroid conditions, which I just gave a lecture. It was one after the one you saw me at, and I did some research on these thyroid conditions and diabetes, these hormone related problems, and what's happened in the last 20 years. The numbers are just, they're almost unbelievable how much it's escalated. Why? It's the amount of toxins, and I went on to prove that in the talk. The amount of toxins that we are exposed to has just gone through the roof in 20 years, which is now why people are struggling to lose weight despite changing their diet or stop losing weight. And you and I were talking about that. But it's why we're having an explosion of thyroid conditions and all of these different conditions. So looking back, it's like, yeah, no wonder God allowed me to go through that, because he knew he was going to be answering the cries of so many people that are going, what's wrong with me? Like, why? Look, if you look at people in our space, they are dealing with these things that I'm talking about, with supplements, with medications, with stimulants, and yet they think that's normal. It's not, right? We should be able to function without any of it. But that's not the case today.
Okay, I'm still stuck on the metal in my mouth because now you got me really thinking about that. And thankfully, I'm going to resolve it in a few minutes. But yes, the thyroid disorders are increasing in number even since I started my business several years ago. The amount of clients coming in who say, I have hypothyroidism, I have Hashimoto's, I have this, I have that, I have Graves' disease. It's just so sad, the number of people
Yeah.
coming in with type 2 diabetes. And it's really the rain barrel effect. So you've referenced this effect. It's the amount of toxins, and it's kind of this overflowing rain barrel where then you manifest disease or you
Exactly.
have these particular symptoms. But let me just, I got to back up and hear more about your recovery, because it took
Mm.
you a bit of time to
Yeah.
figure out about this, the neurotoxicity diagnosis. But then how long was the recovery? What were the three most important things you did? And then I want to dive more into hormones, and share some more about who you work with and who and how you help them.
Once I realized what was wrong, then through a lot of prayer, I have to realize that when I went online, and by the way, it wasn't what it was today then, right? Meaning like there wasn't as much information back when I was digging, right? But I found a lot of, you know, contradictory information, right? It was just crazy what I found. So it was definitely through prayer that God led me to the right answers. And like so many, I went down some blind roads as well. But it was getting the neurotoxins, again, biotoxins from mold, the accumulation of different heavy metals that my detox pathways shut down. They were overwhelmed. And that's what I teach today, right? Is real detox is a cellular problem. Every day, your cells are getting rid of toxins. If we didn't, you would be dead. When you make energy in your cells, you make waste and toxins that it has to get rid of. So what happens is when those detox pathways in the cell slow down, now you start accumulating these toxins in the cell. And guess what happens? Your genes start to get triggered. Now the weakness of the thyroid gene that you got from maybe your mom. See, your DNA is not your destiny, but we do inherit weaknesses. Now it's triggered. Now the diabetes. Now all of these weird symptoms, they start happening. It's a cellular problem. My saying is we don't get well until we fix the cell, and more specifically detox the cell. That's how I got myself well. I'm telling you, as God led me through the processes that I teach now, it was like, okay, the understanding of how the cell membrane is a critical component of how the cell moves good things in, bad things out. How cell energy, when that depletes, now you don't have enough energy to get rid of the toxins. And again, like burning wood in a fireplace, if you don't open the damper and get rid of that smoke, you die in the home. If our home is analogous of a cell, this toxin builds up in the home, everything shuts down, right? Including us, we die. So we have to open the damper. That's what opening up those cell membranes is. And then there's something that's called methylation, that if you start to get toxic cells, methylation depletes. Oh, methylation is so important that you can't now get rid of toxic hormones. And toxic hormones start building up. So bad estrogen starts building up, bad androgens, and now we end up getting diagnoses that we have no idea is related to what's going on in the cell. Something as simple as a carbon and three hydrogens, that's what methylation is, has to attach to these toxic hormones and get rid of them. Otherwise, we build up. Oh, and that leads to cancer, and that leads to other hormone dysfunction. How many people are just taking more hormones because they go to their functional medicine doctor and they go, oh, your estrogen's low, your progesterone's low. Here, take some more hormones. There's a time and a place. Oh, your thyroid hormone's finally low? Because mine would have went low eventually. Here's the thyroid hormone when the problem's at the cell. And this is the best thing I could do is draw this. We have 50 to 70 trillion of these cells in our body. That's what that is, right? So I mentioned that the cell membrane, that's this. It's a lipid bilayer. That's two layers made of fat, not important. But on every membrane are these hormone receptors. What is in vogue right now is looking at blood levels. If out here is your blood, we're looking at blood levels of hormones, which is absolutely irrelevant, especially in the beginning when people don't feel well. But here's the problem. If we just use thyroid hormone has to attach to that receptor, and then it gets its message in the cell, all is well. Even some of it has to be let into the cell. When that happens, all is well. But what if something is blocking those receptors? Now, that could be thyroid. That could be estrogen. That could be progesterone. That could be testosterone. Or it could even be insulin. You've heard of, your viewers have heard of insulin resistance. That means you have plenty of insulin, oftentimes too much, but it means that your cell's resisting the insulin. It can't get attached to the receptor, or the receptor's blunted, and it doesn't get its job done. The number one reason why people can't lose weight today, number one reason why people don't feel well today, have enough energy, have anxiety, it's called hormone resistance. Your cell's not hearing the hormones. So what are we doing? Even in alternative medicine, we're looking at blood levels of hormones and saying, oh, you just need more. You know what that's like? It's like shouting at our kids. In the beginning it works as we take these hormones, but as you shout at your kids, it works less and less and less. And the key is to get the children hearing your voice better, right? And that's our cells. So I have what I teach, my 5 R's, and my 5 R's became a roadmap of how we fix the cell. And R number 2 is regenerating the cell membranes. R3 is restoring cell energy. R4 is reducing the inflammation in the cell. And R5 is that methylation. It's reestablishing methylation. Because as toxins build up here, we start to not feel well. And that's what I do. That's how I got my life back, and that's what I've been teaching. So yeah, hormone problems are a problem today, but where we're trying to fix it is not going to happen. The way we're doing it.
Oh my goodness, so good. If you are listening to the podcast, be sure that you go onto YouTube, because you're going to see a really artistic drawing that Dr. Pompa just did on his notepad.
Some people are listening going, what is he saying? I apologize.
You don't want to miss this really artistic drawing that I'll post it on Instagram. So many good nuggets there. And I think, for me, kind of one of the things that my ears perked up is when you said you go to a functional medicine doctor and they give you hormones just because your hormone levels are low. And just because someone is a functional medicine doctor doesn't mean they're doing the right thing. So I want to just say that there's a very big increasing number of functional medicine doctors, but I have had negative experiences with functional medicine. I just went and got my blood work done recently, and I'd heard, good things about somebody, and I'm getting my blood work done and getting everything. And then I, am prescribed a bunch of supplements where obviously this doctor is going to make money. And the first supplement that arrives in the mail is a weight loss peptide. I was like, what is this? What is that? I'm not looking to lose weight. What are you sending me a weight loss peptide? I was furious, but I'm like, it's just, you have to work with the right person who has compassion, understands the issues, is willing to get to the root cause in a way
that's
that
the key.
Yes, that's absolutely the key.
Functional medicine, unfortunately, has moved further away from that, getting to the cause.
Right.
And a lot of it's to do to the fancy tests that sound so sexy. All the genetic SNP testing. Oh, we're going to develop a diet and a supplement program based on your SNPs, your genetic SNPs. It's hogwash. Trust me, it is. And I 10 years ago, got very in depth in it. And one thing I learned and moved away from is that it wasn't changing our outcomes. And because I have the opportunity to teach doctors, I was able to see it more on a mass scale of okay, this is crazy. And then you start seeing every 5 years, even sooner, things massively change. Oh, we thought that MTHFR SNP was this, and it was so important. Well, we realize now there's so many ways around it, and the body really adjusts to these things and adapts to these things and figures it out. It's not that simple. Oh, and the microbiome testing, test your microbiome today and test it a month later. No, forget it. Test it a week later and you'll see 2 different tests, because the microbiome adjusts according to stress, according to what you're eating, just like that. And so these things are, pulling people in. Let's get all this fancy testing. People are spending a lot of money on the supplements and the things that, they're promoting, but really they're not getting to the cause. How did I get my life back? I actually got to the cause. One thing I've been teaching is figure it out through a good history. Start there. Listen to the person who's sitting in front of you, and their story typically reveals their causative factors they've been exposed to. And if you remove the cause, then you have a chance. The body has an innate ability to heal itself. It does. And it's remarkable. When you remove the cause, you can watch all of a sudden the body just start this healing process that it was unable to do. All of a sudden, the weight starts changing, the hormones start changing. That's the magic, and it's amazing. I get sick of myself because I say the same thing over and over again, but it seems like every year I have to shout that message louder.
Yeah. I've actually spoken with an increasing number of doctors who I respect and trust, like yourself, who are saying we're not necessarily doing all the testing and having people buy all these expensive labs and then throwing a ton of supplements at them. We're going a different route now. We're going a different direction. We know the foundational concepts that can really help reset, whether it's the gut or the cell. What are some of like the primary symptoms my listeners need to be looking out for in order to say, wow, this could be the issue, neurotoxicity? Like what are some of 2, 3 symptoms that you say, we know it's the weight won't come off, but what are some other ones that maybe we haven't thought of where they really do need to do a deep dive on this?
Yeah, well, look, I think like your program, it does such a good job of getting the average person, the average American, away from that diet onto a good diet, right? Okay, and I would argue that, okay, so many people right there will be like, they'll lose the weight that they wanted to lose and they'll feel much better. However, now you have the person who does that, does your program and goes, wait a minute, I'm still dealing with anxiety. So if I had to pick 3 symptoms, anxiety, brain fog, and energy loss, right? If you make the dietary changes that Amanda recommends, you should have full energy throughout your day. You shouldn't be still dealing with anxiety and brain fog. There's something else going on upstream. And, I can add sleep issues right to that, where people wake up in the middle of the night, can't get back to sleep, or they can't fall asleep. That's an absolute neurotoxic issue. So if that's you, then yeah, there's something still going on upstream. Or maybe you did lose that 10, 15 pounds, but you stopped. And now you're looking at yourself like, what happened? Why did it stop? I'm eating better than ever. I'm eating even better now. Why did it stop? That's typically a neurotoxic issue. Again, because weight loss has more to do with hormones oftentimes than even what we're eating, right? But the fact is that if our cells hear our hormones well, we feel well. We burn fat for energy when we're not eating. Everything works wonderful. Our cortisol levels remain balanced. So therefore, our stress levels remain balanced. Cortisol has to do with weight loss. So all of that works. But when our cells don't hear our hormones, we have a new problem. Or when toxins build up in the control tower, right? That's the brain. In the center is that pituitary that drives your thyroid, right? Tells it to do what to do, your adrenals, all your hormones. If you have a neurotoxic issue that's now affecting the brain, you got another problem.
Okay, I have a couple more rapid fire questions for you. I just kind of want to hear your opinion. They're a little bit more upper level. If you don't want to share an opinion, we can pass. What are your thoughts on exosome injections? Do you have any opinions on that?
Well, I know a lot about stem cells because when I hit 51 years old, that was some years ago, I started getting all my injuries of past became problematic. So all of a sudden it was like, yeah, I blew out that disc years ago. Now it was affecting me where I couldn't ski anymore. Okay, so I wasn't going to get surgery, so I started looking into stem cells. I had a knee injury, same thing. So exosomes are produced by stem cells. Stem cells release this communication molecule. That's really what an exosome is, and it signals healing. So instead of giving stem cells, what if we just give these communication molecules called exosomes? I've used them. I don't use Botox. My wife doesn't either, but we actually use exosomes. So you can actually get exosomes injected. You can actually just needle your face and do exosomes on the outside of your face. It works. But in joints, it also works. So there is a growing understanding of the exosomes. In the United States, there's a gray zone for using them topically. There's probably less of a gray zone for using them internally, although they work. So there's my opinion.
Okay, I love it. What about NAD plus injections or IVs? What are your thoughts on that? I know it
Yeah,
can
NAD
help.
is part of how we make energy in the electron transport chain in the mitochondria.
Yeah.
And NAD works. Now look, again, if your cells are inflamed, like I described, NAD will be very short-lived for you, and it's not cheap. So get to the cause. However, no doubt NAD can help you. I think it'll help someone who's already healthy more so even than someone who's, completely inflamed.
Yeah.
Listen, if something's upstream, and here's what we see today as well. People are trying to fix their gut and their hormone problems, right? Or, just their energy problems. Maybe that's why they're doing NAD. If you have just bought a brand new piece of property on a river, spent a lot of money on it, right? And you decide, hey, the fish are dying here, the plants don't look good. I'm going to put all this money into making that little ecosystem better. And you do that. And 3 months later, it's all dead again. And then you do it again and spend more money. This time, someone told you how to do it right. You do it again, and they're all dead again in 4 months. And your neighbor comes over and says, hey, Amanda, save your money. 20 miles upstream, there's a factory putting lead and mercury into the water, and that's what's happening, right? So a lot of us are doing those treatments that it costs a lot of money, or a lot of probiotics, or a lot of whatever it is, the analogy you get. It's like when meanwhile there's poison that's in you, right? Something you accumulated. Remember, these toxins that I'm talking about, we don't just get them. No, they accumulate. You know where they start accumulating? In the womb. So you know where my mercury in my brain started? There's a study called the DRASH study. That begins with a D, DRASH study from Germany. And that was the first study, now there's been several, to show that, ladies, the number of silver fillings that you had or have in your mouth is proportional to how much mercury on autopsies they found in the baby's brain. That's where it starts. The number one source of lead toxicity is mom. Yep, during pregnancy. You lose a little bone during pregnancy, but that's where lead is stored, and out comes the lead. So the point is our buckets start filling, and we start accumulating these toxins until one day, and Amanda, you gave the analogy, the bucket overflows, and that's what happened to me. Healthy until I wasn't, and that's what we have to get to. We want to get our health back. We have to empty the buckets.
Wow. Okay, final question. What is a non-negotiable in your own life to maintain your health and wellness, whether it's to be sure that your cells are taken care of or that you maintain energy? What's one non-negotiable that you do every single day?
I'm going to give two only because I want to give one that's applicable to everyone right now. Okay, but mine is I just finished one of my brain phases, right? We have a prep phase, I teach, body phase, and a brain phase. I will never not do them. I do them periodically because there are things, neurotoxins that we are exposed to that we cannot control. We can change our beauty products, which you should. We can change our laundry detergent, the water we drink, the food we eat. You can make better choices. However, right now we have some things that are happening. There's something called forever chemicals. You cannot not be exposed to them. In aluminum, they're putting aluminum in jet fuel to make it more efficient. It's one of the ingredients in additives that they're doing to save billions of dollars, because if jets can fly more efficiently, companies save billions of dollars. But one of the ingredients is aluminum. It's falling in the air, causing acid rain. It's ending up in our food, in our water, and even causing more aluminum to release from the crust of the earth and ending up in our food supply. Aluminum, mercury, they have a synergy together and they affect our brain. And we have a world of neurodegenerative conditions exploding, dementia happening in teenagers, unfortunately, and all types of conditions in younger people. So my point is that I believe in my heart of hearts what I teach everybody needs. I do it myself still. The second one, everyone can do today. Here's the non-negotiable. My wife and I, if you go out to eat with us, you will see us say that we are allergic to vegetable and canola oil. That's the number one oil that we are being exposed to. It's not like I have a negotiable. Maybe I'll eat some ice cream every once in a while. Sugar, burn it up in a few hours. We don't do it all the time. No big deal. These oils, they stay in your cells for not hours, not days, not months. They say now over a year. I used to say 120 some days because that was a study that these oils make their way into your cell membranes and drive inflammation of the cell, disrupting what you're trying to get in your cells and the toxins out, disrupting your hormones. It's a non-negotiable. I don't do canola oil, vegetable oil, rancid seed oils as well. Now, again, we could do a whole show on this. There's a lot of bad rap. You can make a seed oil a good oil. Omega-6, yes, people get too much of it, However, omega-6 is the number one important oil in the membrane. That's why it's the most damaging. So we need good omega-6, but the non-negotiable is take vegetable and canola oil out of your diet. Tell people you're allergic. Tell them to use olive oil or real butter. And it's something we travel a lot, Amanda, as you know, and we still have the non-negotiable. We won't
Wow.
eat it.
Okay, that was a great tip. Thank you so much. Dr. Pompa, where can we find you and connect with you online?
I did a webinar. They could go watch it about that, where I like expand on it all. If you go to pompaprogram.com, you can watch it, or you can just go to drpompa.com as well.
Perfect. Pompaprogram.com. I am going to
Watch
add
the
that to the
webinar.
show notes. We will look at that webinar. Thank you so much for taking the time. This has been so informational, and I appreciate your vulnerability in the beginning as well, sharing your story and why and how you entered into this industry and then continued to refine your specialty and heal your own body. So we just truly appreciate it, and we're better off for it.
Yeah, well, you're a world changer as well, and you made a massive impact. So thank you for having me on the show, and thank you for all you do.
Thanks a lot. Bye, everyone.